The next morning brought unexpected developments. Jake arrived at the observation deck for the scheduled military exercises to find the area packed with aliens. What was supposed to be a small demonstration for the human observer had turned into the most attended event in Nexus 7's recent history. Admiral Corvin, a massive Garathian with thick hide and multiple eyes, stood at the center of the chaos trying to restore order. His deep voice rumbled through the deck's communication system. "This is highly irregular," the Admiral announced. This demonstration was designed for a single observer, not a crowd of spectators. "With respect, Admiral," called out Ambassador Valtar from the diplomatic section. "Yesterday's events have raised important questions about our understanding of human capabilities. Many of us feel it would be beneficial to observe these exercises firsthand." Jake noticed that the composition of the crowd was unusual. Instead of just military personnel, there were scientists, diplomats, traders, and representatives from dozens of species. Word had clearly spread far beyond the station itself. Commander Zexai approached Jake, looking somewhat embarrassed. "I may have mentioned our conversation to a few colleagues, and they mentioned it to others, and—" "It snowballed," Jake finished with an understanding nod. "Indeed. The Federation Council has received formal requests from 17 different species to include cultural exchange components in today's exercises." Admiral Corvin's multiple eyes focused on Jake with what might have been amusement. "Commander Morrison, it appears your presence has generated more interest than we anticipated. Would you be willing to participate directly in today's demonstration rather than simply observing?" Jake considered the request carefully. "What kind of participation are you suggesting?" "Nothing dangerous," the Admiral assured him. "Perhaps a comparison of human versus galactic training methods. Show us how your people approach the same challenges we'll be demonstrating." A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. Jake realized this was an opportunity to do more than just observe. He could help bridge the understanding gap between humans and the rest of the galaxy. "I'd be honored to participate," Jake replied. The first exercise was a standard obstacle course designed to test speed, agility, and problem-solving abilities. The course featured energy barriers, gravity wells, floating platforms, and various alien technology challenges. Lieutenant Kazrix, a lean Zalkari warrior with enhanced reflexes, volunteered to demonstrate the standard galactic approach. He moved through the course with impressive speed, his technology-enhanced suit allowing him to leap incredible distances, phase through energy barriers, and manipulate gravity fields with practiced ease. The crowd cheered as Kazrix completed the course in just under 2 minutes, a respectable time that showcased the effectiveness of advanced Federation technology. "Excellent work, Lieutenant," Admiral Corvin announced. "Now, Commander Morrison, would you like to attempt the same course?" Jake studied the obstacle layout, noting the various technological challenges. "I don't have the equipment to phase through energy barriers or manipulate gravity fields. Would it be possible to run a modified version that tests the same skills using different methods?" "Interesting approach," the Admiral mused. "Yes, I believe we can accommodate that request." The engineering team quickly reconfigured the course, replacing technological challenges with physical ones. Energy barriers became climbing walls. Gravity manipulators were replaced with rope swings and balance beams. The floating platforms remained, but now required precise jumping and coordination rather than anti-gravity assistance. Jake approached the modified course while explaining his strategy to the watching crowd. Human training emphasizes adaptability and problem-solving without relying on specific technology. We learn to overcome obstacles using whatever resources are available. As he began the course, Jake's movements looked different from Kazrix's enhanced performance. Where the alien had used powered jumps, Jake used momentum and precise timing. Instead of phasing through barriers, he found efficient climbing routes. Rather than manipulating gravity, he used leverage and balance. The aliens watched in fascination as Jake navigated challenges in ways they'd never considered. His approach was quieter, more fluid, and seemed to require less energy expenditure than the technology-enhanced method when Jake completed the course. The timing display showed he'd finished only 15 seconds slower than Kazrix. Despite using no advanced technology whatsoever, the crowd erupted in amazed discussion. Several aliens began examining the course obstacles with new interest, apparently seeing them from a completely different perspective. "Remarkable," Admiral Corvan rumbled. "Lieutenant Kazrix, would you be willing to attempt Commander Morrison's version of the course?" The young Zalkari looked uncertain. "Without my enhancement suit? I'm not sure I know how to approach these challenges manually." This admission sparked intense debate among the observers. Dr. Thalex, a Cerebral Collective representative, voiced what many were thinking. Are we becoming too dependent on technology? Have we forgotten how to solve problems without artificial assistance? "It's not about technology being bad," Jake interjected. "It's about understanding the principles behind what you're trying to accomplish. Technology should enhance your capabilities, not replace them." Commander Zexhai stepped forward. "May I attempt the manual course? I'd like to test this theory." Without his powered armor, Zexhai's forearms actually became an advantage on the climbing sections. His natural strength and coordination served him well, though he clearly hadn't trained for this type of challenge in decades. He completed the course successfully, though much slower than either previous attempt. "I feel like I'm rediscovering abilities I didn't know I had," Zexhai said afterward. His mandibles clicking with what Jake now recognized as excitement. The exercises continued throughout the day, but the focus had shifted dramatically. Instead of simply demonstrating Federation superiority, the sessions became collaborative learning experiences. Aliens began experimenting with manual approaches to technological challenges. While Jake learned about capabilities and perspectives he'd never imagined during a tactical planning exercise, Jake suggested strategies based on terrain analysis and enemy psychology rather than overwhelming firepower. The aliens found his approach refreshingly different from their usual methodology. "Your people think like water," observed Captain Vexana, an aquatic oceanic species representative. "You flow around obstacles instead of smashing through them." "Sometimes smashing through is the right answer," Jake replied. "But it helps to have options." As the day progressed, Jake noticed a fundamental shift in how the aliens viewed humans. The initial curiosity had evolved into genuine respect and interest in collaboration. Several species representatives approached him about potential joint training programs and cultural exchanges. Admiral Corvan addressed the crowd as the exercises concluded. "Today has been highly educational for all of us. We came here expecting to demonstrate Federation military capabilities to our new human allies. Instead, we've learned that our new allies have much to teach us as well." The Admiral's multiple eyes focused on Jake. "Commander Morrison, the Federation Council has asked me to extend a formal invitation. Would Earth be interested in participating in an expanded cultural and military exchange program?" Jake smiled, realizing that this single day had accomplished more for human-alien relations than months of formal diplomatic negotiations might have achieved. "I think Earth would be very interested in that opportunity." "Admiral," as the crowd began to disperse, Jake reflected on how completely the mission had exceeded his expectations. He'd come to observe alien military capabilities, but instead had helped establish humanity as a valuable partner in galactic affairs. The real learning, he suspected, was just beginning. News of the incident spread through Nexus 7 faster than a ship jumping to hyperspace. Within hours, every alien on the station had heard some version of the story. The details grew more dramatic with each telling, but the core facts remained the same. A human had defeated one of the galaxy's most feared warriors using nothing but his bare hands. Jake found himself the center of attention wherever he went. Aliens who had previously ignored him now stopped to stare openly. Some approached with curiosity, others with barely concealed fear. A few brave ones even asked for demonstrations, which Jake politely declined. In the station's central cantina, a massive space filled with tables, booths, and atmospheric zones for different species. The conversation at every table seemed to revolve around the human. Jake sat alone at a corner table, trying to enjoy his meal in peace while reviewing technical specifications for tomorrow's training exercise. Mind if I join you? Jake looked up to see Commander HFY approaching, carrying what appeared to be a large metal tankard filled with glowing purple liquid. The Krillian's earlier arrogance was completely gone, replaced by genuine curiosity. "Please sit," Jake said. Gesturing to the chair across from him, HFY settled his large frame into the reinforced chair. "I've been thinking about our encounter all day. I've analyzed it from every angle, and I still don't understand how you move so quickly." "Training," Jake said simply. "And experience." "But I've been trained since I was a larva," HFY protested. "I've studied combat techniques from dozens of species. I've never seen anything like what you did." Jake set down his fork and leaned back. "Tell me about your training." "How do Krillian warriors learn to fight?" HFY's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "We begin physical conditioning at age 5. By 10, we're practicing with weapons. By 20, we're learning battlefield tactics. The process continues for decades, building strength, speed, and weapon proficiency. What about hand-to-hand combat?" "We study it, of course, but why would we need it? Our weapons can cut through starship hulls. Our armor can deflect plasma blasts. Close combat is for primitives who lack proper equipment." Jake nodded, beginning to understand. "On Earth, we learned to fight without weapons first. For thousands of years, humans developed martial arts, wrestling, boxing, and countless other fighting styles. We had to, because we didn't have natural weapons like claws or armor like your chitinous shell." "You mean you were forced to become better fighters because you were weaker?" HFY's voice carried a note of surprise. "Exactly. We had to be smarter, faster, and more technical. We learned to use leverage, momentum, and precision instead of relying on brute force." As they talked, other patrons in the cantina began to drift closer, pretending to be engaged in their own conversations while obviously listening. Jake noticed a table of Vorthek crystal beings whose musical communication had dropped to barely audible tones. A group of furry Lupin traders had abandoned their card game entirely. "I've been researching your species since this afternoon," HFY continued. "The Federation files are woefully incomplete. They mention your wars, but only in terms of casualties and territorial disputes. They don't explain how you fight? What would you like to know?" HFY leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. "Everything. How do human warriors train? What makes you so effective in combat? Why aren't you afraid of species that could crush you with their bare hands?" Jake considered his words carefully. "Human warriors don't just train their bodies. We train our minds. We study psychology, tactics, and strategy. We learn to read our opponents, to find weaknesses, to adapt quickly to changing situations. The Federation's greatest military minds are cerebral collective beings with intellects far beyond any individual creature," HFY said. "They process information at speeds no single brain could match." "Intelligence and wisdom aren't the same thing," Jake replied. "A computer can calculate 1,000,000 possibilities in a second, but it takes experience and intuition to know which one matters in a real fight." An Etherian female approached their table hesitantly. "Forgive the interruption, but I couldn't help overhearing. I am Science Officer Laraxi of the exploration vessel Starweaver. Your perspective on combat psychology is fascinating." Jake gestured for her to join them. "Please have a seat." Lyraxi's crystalline features shifted colors as she spoke, apparently indicating emotional states. "My people are pacifists by nature. We've never understood why some species seem to excel at warfare while others do not. We assumed it was simply a matter of natural physical advantages." "Physical advantages help," Jake admitted, "but they're not everything. Some of the best fighters I've known were smaller and weaker than their opponents. They won because they were smarter and better prepared." "But how do you prepare for an enemy you've never faced?" HFY asked. "Each species has different capabilities, different fighting styles. You learn principles that apply regardless of the opponent. Balance, leverage, timing, distance management. These concepts work against any enemy, whether they're human-sized or as big as a Gorathian war beast." The conversation continued for over an hour, drawing a steadily growing audience. Aliens who had never spoken to each other were now engaged in animated discussions about combat philosophy, training methods, and military theory. Jake found himself answering questions from beings he'd never imagined existed. A young dwarven engineer asked about human military technology. A hive mind representative wanted to understand individual versus collective combat strategies. Even a reclusive shadow walker emerged from the darker corners of the cantina to inquire about stealth techniques. "Your species fascinates me," Laraxi said as the crowd began to thin out. "You've turned your physical limitations into strategic advantages. It's remarkably elegant. We've had plenty of motivation to get good at it," Jake said with a wry smile. "Humans have been fighting each other for millennia. We've had lots of practice." Zexai made a sound that might have been laughter. "Perhaps that's why the Federation Council was concerned about your people joining. Not because you're weak, but because you're too good at warfare." Jake hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. If other species relied primarily on superior technology and physical capabilities, they might not know how to deal with opponents who emphasize strategy and adaptability. "Commander Morrison," Lyraxi said, "would you be willing to speak at tomorrow's cultural exchange session? Many of our colleagues would benefit from hearing your perspectives on human military philosophy." "I'm here to observe the training exercises," Jake replied. "But I suppose I could share some insights about human approaches to combat." As the evening wound down and the aliens began to return to their quarters, Jake reflected on how dramatically the day had changed. He'd come to Nexus 7 expecting to be treated as a curiosity at best, a primitive at worst. Instead, he'd found himself in the role of teacher. Sharing knowledge that apparently no one else in the galaxy possessed, tomorrow's training exercise was supposed to demonstrate advanced galactic military techniques to the primitive human observer. Jake was beginning to suspect the demonstration might be more educational for the aliens than for him. The galaxy's understanding of humanity was about to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The trading station Nexus 7 floated in the void between star systems, a massive metal wheel spinning slowly to create artificial gravity. Inside its crowded corridors, dozens of alien species conducted business, traded goods, and shared information from across the galaxy. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements of so many different beings. Commander Jake Morrison walked through the main corridor, his Navy SEAL uniform drawing curious glances from the various aliens. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and calloused hands, he looked unremarkable compared to some of the massive creatures around him. A group of 8-foot-tall Zalkari merchants towered over nearby trading booths, their blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Crystalline Vorthak beings chimed musical notes as they communicated with potential buyers. Jake was here on official business. Earth had recently joined the Galactic Trade Federation and tensions were high. Many species viewed humans as aggressive newcomers who didn't understand galactic politics. The Federation Council had requested that Earth send a representative to observe standard military training exercises, partly to ease concerns about human military capabilities. "Another primitive species trying to play with the big boys," muttered a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a Krillian soldier, easily 7 feet tall with chitinous armor-like skin and 4 arms. The alien's name tag read, Commander Zexai. His species was known throughout the galaxy as elite warriors, serving as peacekeepers and enforcers for the Federation. Jake nodded politely. "Commander, I'm Jake Morrison, representing Earth's military forces." Zexai's mandibles clicked in what Jake assumed was laughter. "Earth military? I've read your species' files. You fight wars with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. How quaint." The Krillian's tone dripped with condescension. Other aliens in the corridor began to take notice of the conversation. A group of tall, elegant Etherian diplomats paused their discussion to listen. Several stocky dwarven traders stopped haggling over mineral rights. Even the insectoid hive mind representatives seemed to focus their collective attention on the exchange. "We do what works," Jake replied calmly, keeping his voice level. He'd dealt with cocky soldiers before, regardless of their species. What works? HFY stepped closer, his forearms spreading slightly in what appeared to be an intimidating gesture. Your entire planet couldn't handle a single Federation patrol ship. We have energy weapons that can vaporize entire city blocks, shields that can deflect asteroid impacts, and soldiers who have trained for centuries. Jake remained still, his hands relaxed at his sides. Impressive technology. Technology you couldn't even comprehend, HFY continued, his voice growing louder. My personal combat suit can lift 3 tons and move faster than your primitive aircraft. I've conquered 12 worlds and defeated champions from 20 different species. Your Navy SEALs are nothing compared to a true galactic warrior. The crowd around them grew larger. Jake noticed that most of the aliens seemed to be enjoying the show, probably expecting the human to back down or flee. He'd seen this before in different forms. Bullies existed in every species. Apparently. I'm sure you're very skilled, Jake said. Maintaining his calm demeanor, HFY's confidence seemed to grow with the audience's attention. Skilled? Human, I am perfection in combat form. Watch this. Without warning, the Krillion's leg shot out in a powerful kick aimed at Jake's midsection. The kick was incredibly fast and strong enough to dent metal, but Jake had been expecting something like this. His SEAL training had taught him to read body language and anticipate attacks. As the leg came toward him, Jake shifted his weight, grabbed the extended limb with both hands, and used HFY's own momentum against him. What happened next took exactly 3 seconds. Jake twisted the Krillion's leg while stepping to the side, sending the much larger alien spinning off balance. As HFY stumbled, Jake swept his other leg, bringing the proud warrior crashing to the deck. Before the alien could recover, Jake had him in a submission hold. One arm wrapped around HFY's neck while controlling one of his 4 arms. The corridor fell completely silent. HFY struggled for a moment, his superior strength evident, but Jake's positioning and technique neutralized the size advantage. The Krillion's chitinous armor provided protection against weapons, but it couldn't help against a properly applied chokehold. Please, HFY gasped, his voice barely audible. I yield. I yield. Jake immediately released the hold and stepped back, offering his hand to help the alien up. His expression remained calm and respectful. As if nothing unusual had happened, the crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and clicking sounds. Several aliens began speaking rapidly in their native languages. While others simply stared in disbelief, HFY slowly got to his feet, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what Jake now recognized as distress. The proud warrior's entire demeanor had changed. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides and his head was lowered in what appeared to be shame. How? HFY whispered. Your species is supposed to be weak, primitive. The Federation files said humans were barely out of their Stone Age. Jake straightened his uniform. We might not have energy weapons or personal shields, but we've had thousands of years to perfect the art of fighting with our bare hands. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. An Etherian diplomat stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting the overhead lights. Most impressive, human. I am Ambassador Veltar. I believe our information about your species may have been incomplete. We're still learning about each other, Jake replied diplomatically. That's why these cultural exchanges are important. HFY looked around at the crowd, then back at Jake. I apologize for my behavior, Commander Morrison. I underestimated your abilities and your species. This was dishonorable. No harm done, Jake said, extending his hand again. Maybe we can grab a drink later and you can tell me about those 12 worlds you conquered? I'd like to hear those stories. The Krillian stared at the offered hand for a moment, then carefully shook it with one of his 4 arms. You would want to share stories with me? After I attacked you? That's what warriors do, Jake said with a slight smile. We fight, we learn, and then we drink together and become better soldiers. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake noticed the way the various aliens looked at him had changed. The dismissive glances were gone. Replaced by curiosity and something that might have been respect, word would spread quickly through the station about what had happened. The human who had taken down a Krillian warrior in 3 seconds would become the subject of many conversations over the coming days. Jake continued down the corridor toward his assigned quarters, unaware that this brief encounter would change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. 3 days after the training exercises, Jake found himself in an emergency briefing room aboard the Federation flagship Celestial Harmony. The mood was tense, with Admiral Corvin's multiple eyes focused on a holographic display showing a star system Jake didn't recognize. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Admiral Corvin explained to the assembled officers. "The hegemony has launched a full-scale invasion of the Altair system. 3 Federation colonies are under siege." Jake studied the tactical display. The hegemony was a militaristic alliance of species that had rejected Federation membership, preferring conquest to cooperation. Their forces were known for ruthless efficiency and overwhelming firepower. "What's the current status?" asked Commander Zexhai, who had been assigned as Jake's liaison officer following the successful cultural exchange. "Bad," Admiral Colvin replied bluntly. "The hegemony brought 12 dreadnoughts and over 200 support vessels. Our local defense forces are outnumbered 4-1. Captain Laraxi, the Etherean science officer Jake had met in the cantina, pulled up additional tactical information. Our reinforcements are still 6 hours away. At current loss rates, the colony's shields will fail within 3 hours. What about evacuation?" Jake asked. "Impossible," Admiral Corvin said grimly. "The hegemony is jamming all transportation frequencies. Nothing gets in or out of the system." Jake studied the display more carefully, noting ship positions, energy readings, and tactical formations. Something about the hegemony's approach seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it immediately. "Admiral, may I ask why I'm being briefed on this situation?" "I'm just an observer." The massive Garathian's hide darkened, indicating deep concern. "Because, Commander Morrison, our best tactical minds have spent the last 18 hours trying to find a solution, and we've come up empty. After what we witnessed during the training exercises, several officers suggested we might benefit from a human perspective on the problem. You want me to help plan a military operation against a superior enemy force? Unless you object to assisting Federation civilians who are about to be slaughtered, yes." Jake looked around the briefing room. The assembled officers represented some of the galaxy's most advanced military minds. Yet they were openly admitting they needed help from a representative of a species they'd considered primitive just days ago. "Show me everything you've got," Jake said, for the next hour. Jake absorbed tactical data, fleet compositions, planetary layouts, and hegemony attack patterns. The Federation officers answered his questions patiently, though he could sense their growing desperation as time ticked away. Finally, Jake leaned back from the holographic display. "I think I see the problem. You're trying to fight them on their terms." "What do you mean?" asked Captain Vexana, her aquatic features rippling with confusion. "The hegemony brought overwhelming force because that's how they always fight. They show up with more ships, more firepower, and more soldiers than their enemies can handle. Your response has been to try to match their strength with reinforcements." "That's standard military doctrine," protested Commander Thilex, the collective representative. "You meet force with equal or greater force." "Sometimes," Jake agreed. "But what if instead of meeting their strength, you attack their weaknesses?" Admiral Corvin's multiple eyes focused intently on Jake. "Explain." Jake manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific aspects of the hegemony formation. "Look at their deployment pattern. 12 dreadnoughts arranged in a perfect sphere around the colony worlds, with support vessels filling the gaps. It's an impressive show of force, but it's also predictable." "How so?" "They're so confident in their superiority that they're not adapting to local conditions. They're using a standard siege formation that probably works great against conventional Federation tactics." Jake highlighted the energy readings from the hegemony fleet. "These ships are maintaining constant communication with each other, probably coordinating their bombardment patterns for maximum efficiency. But that coordination requires a central command structure." "The command ship," Zexhai said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. Exactly. But it's not just about taking out their command ship. Look at their formation again. They've arranged their forces to provide maximum firepower coverage, but they've also created a weakness. Jake zoomed in on a specific section of the tactical display. See this gap between the 4th and 7th dreadnoughts? It's small, but it's there because they prioritized interlocking fields of fire over complete coverage. Captain Lyraxi's crystalline features shifted to a bright blue. You're suggesting a precision strike through that gap? Not just any precision strike. The hegemony expects Federation forces to approach from outside the system, trying to break through their perimeter. They're not watching for threats that originate from inside their formation. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You want to infiltrate their formation? Admiral Corvin's voice carried a note of disbelief. Better than that. I want to use their own tactics against them. The hegemony relies on overwhelming force and predictable strategies because those approaches have always worked for them. They're not prepared for an enemy that thinks differently. Jake expanded the tactical display to show the entire star system. What if instead of trying to break their siege from the outside, we broke it from the inside? A small force using stealth and misdirection could penetrate their formation and create chaos at exactly the right moment. That's suicide, protested Commander Thylex. Even if a small force could somehow reach their command ship, they'd be destroyed instantly by the supporting vessels. Only if they knew we were there, Jake replied. But what if we made them think the attack was coming from somewhere else entirely? Jake began outlining a plan that made several of the alien officers visibly uncomfortable. It involved deception, misdirection, and calculated risks that went against everything they'd been taught about proper military procedure. This is highly irregular, Admiral Corvan said when Jake finished his explanation. So was a human defeating a Krillian warrior in 3 seconds, Jake pointed out. Sometimes irregular approaches work better than conventional ones. Commander Zexhai leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, our conventional approaches aren't working. The colonies will fall within 2 hours if we don't try something different. Captain Lyraxi added her support. The scientific principles behind Commander Morrison's plan are sound. The psychological analysis of hegemony behavior patterns supports his conclusions. Admiral Kovan was quiet for several long minutes, his multiple eyes moving between the tactical display and the assembled officers. Finally, he spoke. Commander Morrison, are you volunteering to lead this mission personally? Jake had been expecting this question. If you'll have me, yes. But I'd want to choose my own team from volunteers who understand the risks. You'd be commanding alien soldiers you've known for less than a week, using tactics that have never been tested against hegemony forces, in a mission that our own strategists consider nearly impossible. Yes, sir. Admiral Corvin's hide shifted to a deep purple, indicating what Jake was learning meant determination mixed with resignation. Very well, Commander. You have authorization to proceed. What do you need? Jake smiled grimly. A small, fast ship, a crew that can think on their feet, and about 90 minutes to pull off the impossible. As the briefing room erupted into activity, Jake realized he was about to either save 3 Federation colonies or become a very small footnote in galactic military history. Either way, the galaxy's perception of human capabilities was about to change again. The Shadow Dancer was not the kind of ship Jake had expected to command. Small, sleek, and designed for reconnaissance rather than combat. It looked fragile compared to the massive Federation warships surrounding them. But as Captain Lyraxi explained the vessel's capabilities, Jake realized it was perfect for their mission. Adaptive stealth systems, quantum displacement drives, and sensor packages that can mimic almost any ship's signature in the database, Lyraxi said as they walked through the compact bridge. She's built for getting into places undetected. Jake's volunteer crew was equally unconventional. Commander Zexhai had insisted on joining despite his size making the cramped ship even more crowded. Lieutenant Kazrix, the young Zelkari from the training exercises, had volunteered as pilot. Dr. Thylex represented the collective's analytical capabilities, while Engineer Dexmol, a stocky dwarven technician, handled the ship's systems. This is either the bravest or most foolish crew in the galaxy, Zexai muttered as he squeezed into the tactical station. Sometimes those are the same thing, Jake replied. Studying the final mission briefings, the plan was complex but relied on simple principles: misdirection and timing. While the main Federation fleet approached the hegemony forces from the expected direction, drawing their attention and resources, Jake's team would infiltrate the enemy formation using false ship signatures and stealth technology. Their target wasn't just the hegemony command ship, but the psychological warfare opportunity it represented. If they could create enough chaos at the right moment, the disciplined hegemony formation might collapse into confusion. 30 minutes to insertion point, Kazrix announced from the pilot's seat. His enhanced reflexes made him ideal for the precision flying they'd need to navigate between enemy ships. Jake activated the communication system. Admiral Corvin, this is Shadow Dancer. We're approaching the system perimeter. Acknowledged, Shadow Dancer. Main fleet will begin diversionary attack in 28 minutes. Once that starts, you'll have a narrow window before they realize what's happening. Understood. Beginning stealth approach now. The ship's systems hummed as the adaptive camouflage engaged. On the tactical display, Jake watched their sensor signature change from a Federation reconnaissance vessel to a hegemony supply transport. Disguise holding steady, Dr. Thylex reported. We should be able to maintain this deception for approximately 45 minutes before their sensors detect the anomalies. That's longer than we need, Jake said. Dexmal, how are our special modifications coming along? The dwarven engineer looked up from his console with what might have been a grin. Your human suggestions were ... creative. I've never seen weapon systems configured quite like this before. But the theoretical mathematics are sound. Instead of trying to outfit their small ship with enough firepower to fight hegemony dreadnoughts, Jake had suggested a different approach. They would use their weapons to create specific types of interference and confusion rather than direct damage. Approaching enemy perimeter, Kazrix announced. I'm detecting multiple scanning attempts, but our disguise is holding. Through the viewports, Jake could see the hegemony fleet in all its terrifying glory. 12 massive dreadnoughts hung in space like metal mountains, their hulls bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Smaller ships moved between them in precise patterns, maintaining the siege formation. They're so confident, Zexai observed. Look at those patrol routes. Completely predictable. That confidence is going to be their weakness, Jake replied. Lyraxi, start monitoring their communication frequencies. I want to know the moment their attention shifts to the main fleet. Communications analysis in progress, the Etherean science officer confirmed. Their chatter is very routine. Status reports, supply coordination, bombardment schedules. The Shadow Dancer glided between enemy ships like a minnow swimming among sharks. Jake found himself holding his breath as they passed within a few hundred meters of a hegemony destroyer. Its weapons tracking potential threats that never quite focused on their disguised vessel. Contact from Admiral Corvin, Dr. Thylex announced. Main fleet beginning attack run in 60 seconds. Jake felt his pulse quicken. All stations prepare for combat. The moment their attention shifts, we move. Through the ship's sensors, they watched as the Federation's main battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. The response from the hegemony forces was immediate and predictable. Ships began turning toward the new threat, communication traffic spiked, and weapon systems powered up across the entire enemy formation. Now, Jake said quietly. Kazrix's hands flew over his controls as the Shadow Dancer suddenly accelerated toward the center of the enemy formation. Their disguise signature helped them blend in with the repositioning hegemony ships, but it wouldn't hold for long. Target acquired, Zexai announced. Hegemony command vessel Eternal Dominance bearing 27 Mark IV. The command ship was a monster, easily twice the size of the largest Federation vessels. Its hull was covered with communication arrays, sensor dishes, and command coordination systems that linked the entire hegemony fleet. Dexmal. Initiate Phase 1, Jake ordered. The dwarven engineers' modifications to their weapons went to work. Instead of firing destructive energy beams, the Shadow Dancer began broadcasting carefully tuned interference signals designed to disrupt specific types of military communication protocols. Communication jamming successful, Lyraxi reported. The command ship is losing contact with approximately 30% of their fleet, but the hegemony forces were well trained. Within seconds, backup communication systems began activating and the jamming became less effective. They're adapting faster than projected, Dr. Thylex warned. We need to move to Phase 2 immediately. Do it, Jake confirmed. This time, instead of jamming communications, they began broadcasting false orders using captured hegemony command codes. The orders were subtle but devastating, small course corrections that would put ships slightly out of position, weapon targeting adjustments that created gaps in their coverage, and supply coordination changes that sent support vessels to the wrong locations. It's working, Zexhai said with amazement. Look at their formation. It's starting to break up. The carefully orchestrated hegemony siege formation was indeed becoming ragged. Ships moved out of supporting positions chasing false orders. Weapon coverage developed holes. The psychological impact of confusion was spreading faster than their commanders could correct it, but their luck couldn't hold forever. We've been detected, Kazrix announced. 3 destroyers breaking off to intercept us. How long until they reach us? Jake asked. 2 minutes at current speed? Jake looked at the tactical display. The hegemony formation was deteriorating, but not enough. The main Federation fleet was engaged with the enemy's perimeter forces, but the core dreadnoughts around the colonies were still operational and still firing on civilian targets. Time for Phase 3, Jake said. Take us directly at the command ship, sir? Kazrix's voice carried a note of concern. That's the most heavily defended vessel in their fleet. Exactly. Which means when we attack it, every ship in the area will turn to defend it instead of coordinating their siege. Jake's plan was entering its most dangerous phase. Instead of trying to destroy the command ship, which was impossible with their small vessel, they would make themselves such an obvious and immediate threat that the entire hegemony fleet would focus on stopping them. All power to engines, Jake ordered. Let's see how much chaos one small ship can create. The Shadow Dancer streaked toward the massive command vessel, every weapon system on nearby hegemony ships turning to track their approach. Within seconds, space around them filled with energy blasts and missile trails, but in their desperation to protect their command ship, the hegemony forces were doing exactly what Jake had hoped, abandoning their disciplined formation and creating the opening the Federation fleet needed. The real battle was just beginning. Space around the Shadow Dancer exploded into a deadly light show as dozens of hegemony weapons converged on their position. Kazrix's enhanced reflexes were the only thing keeping them alive, throwing the ship into impossible maneuvers that defied both physics and common sense. Shields at 40% and falling, Dexmo reported, his voice steady despite the ship bucking around him like an angry beast. Hull stress approaching critical levels, Dr. Thylex added. We can't maintain this approach vector much longer. But Jake wasn't watching their ship's status. His attention was fixed on the tactical display showing the hegemony fleet's formation. Their desperate gambit was working better than he dared hope. Look at them move, Zexhai said with something approaching admiration. Half their fleet is breaking formation to intercept us. It was true. The disciplined siege formation that had held 3 Federation colonies. Hostage was dissolving into chaos as hegemony commanders tried to protect their command ship from what appeared to be a suicidal attack. Run, Admiral Coven to Shadow Dancer, came the transmission from the main Federation fleet. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. We're breaking through their perimeter. Copy that, Admiral, Jake replied, then switched to internal communications. Lyraxi, are you detecting any changes in their bombardment patterns? The Etherian science officer's features cycled through several colors before settling on a hopeful blue-green. Yes, the dreadnoughts around the colonies are reducing their fire rate. Some are moving to support the ships chasing us. Perfect. The psychological impact was spreading exactly as Jake had hoped. the hegemony's greatest strength. Their overwhelming coordinated force was becoming their weakness as individual commanders abandoned the overall strategy to deal with immediate threats. Incoming. Transmission from the hegemony command ship, Dr. Thylex announced. Put it through, Jake ordered. The holographic display shimmered, revealing a massive reptilian alien with scarred hide and cybernetic implants around his eyes. This had to be Fleet Admiral Gerthuk, the hegemony's most feared military commander. Federation vessel, you will cease this futile attack and surrender immediately. Gerthuk's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Your sacrifice accomplishes nothing. Our forces will crush your colonies regardless. Jake looked around at his crew. Zexhi's mandibles were clicking rapidly. Kazrix was completely focused on piloting. The others watched him expectantly, waiting for his response. Admiral Gerthuk, Jake replied calmly. I'm Commander Jake Morrison of Earth. I have a counter-proposal for you. The reptilian admiral's cybernetic eyes focused more intently. Earth? The primitive world that recently joined the Federation? What could you possibly propose that would interest me? Single combat. You and me. Winner takes the system. The bridge of the Shadow Dancer fell completely silent. Even the ship's system seemed to quiet as Jake's words hung in the air. Gerthuk's scarred features twisted into what might have been amusement. You challenge me to personal combat? Do you have any idea who I am, human? I know you're someone who values strength and direct confrontation. I also know that your entire fleet is currently out of position chasing one small ship instead of maintaining the siege that was supposed to break the colony's defenses 3 hours ago. The hegemony admiral's expression darkened. You think you can manipulate me with such obvious psychological tactics? I think you're exactly the kind of warrior who would accept a direct challenge, especially from someone you consider beneath you. Jake was taking an enormous risk. Everything he'd learned about hegemony culture suggested they respected personal combat and individual strength above almost everything else. But if he was wrong, even if I were to accept such a ridiculous proposal, Gerthuk said slowly, what makes you think you could survive 30 seconds against me? I am augmented with the finest combat enhancements our technology can provide. I have personally killed champions from a dozen species. Maybe, but 3 days ago, nobody thought a human could take down a Krillian warrior either. Jake saw recognition flash in the Admiral's cybernetic eyes. Word of his encounter with Zexhi had apparently spread beyond Federation space. Interesting, Gerthuk mused. Very well, human. I accept your challenge. But understand the stakes. When I defeat you, your fleet will withdraw and the colonies will surrender unconditionally. And when I win, Jake replied, your forces leave this system immediately and never return. Agreed. Dock with my command ship. We will settle this properly. The transmission ended, leaving Jake's crew staring at him in various states of shock, admiration, and concern. Commander, Zexhi said carefully, are you certain about this course of action? Gerthuk is not merely a warrior. He is a legend. His combat record is ... extensive. I know, Jake replied. But look at the tactical display again. The others turned their attention back to the fleet positions. During their conversation with Gerthuk, the hegemony formation had continued to deteriorate. Ships were still moving out of position, the siege bombardment had virtually stopped, and the Federation's main fleet was making significant progress breaking through the enemy perimeter. You never intended to actually fight him, Dr. Thylex said, understanding dawning in his voice. Oh, I fully intend to fight him, Jake corrected. But the challenge itself has already accomplished the main objective. Look how much time we've bought for the colonies and our fleet. The docking approach will take 12 minutes, Kazrix reported. Even if this is a deception, we'll be committed to it. Jake nodded. Sometimes the best strategy is the one your enemy never sees coming. Gerthuk expects either cowardice or foolish bravado from a primitive human. He's not prepared for someone who's actually thinking several moves ahead. As the Shadow Dancer began its approach to the massive Hegemony command ship, Jake reflected on how much the situation had changed since his first day on Nexus 7. What had started as a simple observation mission had become something much larger. Humanity's introduction to galactic politics, military strategy, and the complex relationships between dozens of alien species. "Commander," Laraxi said quietly, "the Federation fleet reports they've broken through the Hegemony perimeter. They're engaging the dreadnoughts around the colonies." "And the bombardment?" Jake asked. "Virtually stopped. The colony shields are holding." Jake smiled grimly. Whether he won or lost the upcoming fight with Gurthak, the mission had already succeeded. The colonies were safe, the Hegemony formation was broken, and the Federation fleet was in position to drive off the invaders, but Jake Morrison had never backed down from a fight in his life. And he wasn't about to start now. Especially not when the entire galaxy would be watching to see what humans were really made of. "Take us in," he ordered. Time to show them how a Navy SEAL handles impossible odds. The docking bay of the Hegemony command ship loomed ahead, and with it, a confrontation that would echo through galactic military history. The Hegemony command ship's docking bay was a cathedral of military might. Massive support beams stretched overhead, decorated with battle trophies from conquered worlds. Hundreds of alien soldiers lined the viewing platforms, representing dozens of species united under Hegemony rule through conquest rather than cooperation. Jake walked across the deck toward the center arena, flanked by his crew who had insisted on witnessing the combat despite the risks. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Word of the challenge had apparently spread throughout the Hegemony fleet, and everyone wanted to see their legendary admiral face the human, who had single-handedly disrupted their perfect siege. Fleet Admiral Gurthak stood waiting in the center of a circular combat area marked with alien symbols. Up close, he was even more imposing than he'd appeared on the holographic display. Nearly 8 feet tall with thick, armored hide and cybernetic enhancements that pulsed with energy. He looked like a living weapon designed for maximum destruction. "You are smaller than I expected," Gurthak rumbled as Jake approached. "Are you certain you wish to proceed with this foolishness?" "Size isn't everything," Jake replied calmly, beginning to stretch and loosen his muscles. "Sometimes it's actually a disadvantage." The Hegemony Admiral's augmented features showed confusion at this statement. In his experience, larger and stronger always meant better in combat. "The rules are simple," Gurthak announced to the watching crowd. "No weapons, no armor, no external assistance. Combat continues until one combatant yields or is unable to continue." Jake nodded his agreement, though he was still analyzing his opponent's movements and looking for weaknesses. The cybernetic implants were obvious enhancement points, but they also represented potential vulnerabilities if he could find the right approach. "Begin when ready," called out a Hegemony officer serving as referee. Gurthak immediately charged forward, his massive bulk moving with surprising speed thanks to his mechanical enhancements. His strategy was obvious: use overwhelming force to end the fight quickly and decisively. Jake had expected this approach. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, allowing Gurthak's momentum to carry him past. As the Admiral stumbled slightly, Jake struck at one of the cybernetic connection points behind his opponent's knee. The blow wasn't powerful enough to cause significant damage, but it served its purpose. Gurthak's enhanced systems flickered momentarily, causing a slight disruption in his coordination. "Impossible," the Admiral growled, spinning around to face Jake again. "My enhancements are military grade. Your primitive attacks cannot affect them." "Maybe not directly," Jake agreed, circling his opponent carefully. "But every system has weaknesses if you know where to look." This time, Gurthak approached more cautiously, using his reach advantage to throw powerful punches while keeping Jake at a distance. The strategy was sound, but it relied on the assumption that Jake would try to match him in terms of raw power. Instead, Jake focused on movement and timing. He ducked under swinging arms, slipped past grappling attempts, and continued targeting the joints and connection points of Gurthak's cybernetic systems. Each strike was precisely placed and designed to cause cumulative stress rather than immediate damage. The watching crowd began to murmur in confusion. This wasn't the kind of combat they were accustomed to seeing. Where was the dramatic clash of titans? Why wasn't the human trying to overpower his obviously superior opponent? Stand still and fight. Gerthik roared in frustration as another attempted grab missed completely. I am fighting, Jake replied, landing another precise strike against the cybernetic interface. Just not the way you expected. That was when the Admiral's enhancements began to malfunction more seriously. The constant micro-impacts to his cybernetic systems had created cascading failures in his augmentation network. His enhanced speed decreased, his targeting systems became erratic, and his coordination began to suffer. What have you done to me? Gerthik demanded, his voice carrying a note of something Jake had never expected to hear from the legendary warrior: fear. I've shown you the difference between enhancement and dependence, Jake said, continuing to circle his increasingly desperate opponent. Your technology makes you stronger, but it also makes you predictable. And everything predictable has a counter. Jake had learned something important about hegemony combat philosophy during their brief engagement. Their warriors relied so heavily on technological superiority that they'd forgotten the fundamental principles of fighting, adaptability, strategy, and the ability to overcome opponents who didn't follow the expected patterns. Gerthik lunged forward in one final, desperate attack. His cybernetic system sparked and stuttered as he tried to use his remaining enhancements to grab Jake in a crushing bear hug. Jake was ready. As the Admiral's arms closed around him, he used a leverage technique that redirected Gerthik's own strength against him. The massive alien found himself suddenly airborne, then crashing heavily to the deck as Jake applied a throwing technique perfected over thousands of years of human martial arts development. Before Gerthik could recover, Jake had him in a submission hold that neutralized his size advantage and put pressure on several of his malfunctioning cybernetic interfaces simultaneously. Yield, Jake said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make his point clear. For a moment, the entire docking bay was silent. Hundreds of alien soldiers stared in disbelief at their legendary admiral being held helpless by a human they'd considered primitive minutes earlier. Gerthik's voice was barely audible. I yield. Jake immediately released the hold and stepped back, offering his hand to help the fallen admiral to his feet. The gesture seemed to confuse Gerthik even more than the combat techniques. Why do you help me up? The admiral asked as he struggled to stand, his damaged cybernetics making coordination difficult. Because the fight is over, Jake said simply. Now we honor our agreement. Gerthik looked around the docking bay at his watching soldiers, then back at Jake. You could have killed me. My systems were failing. I was helpless. The objective was never to kill you, Jake explained. It was to prove a point about strength, strategy, and the dangers of overconfidence. The implications of what had just happened began to sink in throughout the assembled crowd. A human, using nothing but skill and tactical thinking, had defeated one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. If humans were capable of this, what else could they do that the galaxy didn't understand? The hegemony honors its agreements, Gerthik said formally, his voice carrying across the docking bay. My forces will withdraw from this system immediately. As the word went out across the hegemony fleet, Jake reflected on how completely the situation had changed from his first day on Nexus 7. What had started as a simple kick from an overconfident alien warrior had led to humanity establishing itself as a major player in galactic affairs. Commander Zexhai approached as the crowd began to disperse. Commander Morrison, I believe the galaxy owes you a significant debt. Not just for saving the colonies, but for teaching us all something important about the nature of true strength. We all learned something today, Jake replied. Humans included. The galaxy is a lot more interesting and complex than Earth ever imagined. As they prepared to return to the Shadow Dancer, Jake received a priority transmission from Admiral Corvin. Commander Morrison, the Federation Council has asked me to convey their gratitude for your actions today. They've also requested that you remain in the sector to help establish new military cooperation protocols. Jake looked out through the docking bay's viewports at the stars beyond, knowing that humanity's relationship with the galaxy would never be the same. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had proven they had much to offer their new galactic neighbors. Tell the Council I'd be honored to accept their request, Admiral. I think we're just getting started. The real adventure, Jake realized, was just beginning. And the next time someone in the galaxy underestimated what humans could accomplish, they would remember the story of the Navy SEAL who took down a Krillian warrior in 3 seconds, disrupted an entire military siege, and defeated a legendary admiral using nothing but skill, strategy, and the kind of determination that had carried his species from caves to the stars. In cantinas and trading posts across the galaxy, beings would tell stories about the day everything changed. The day humanity showed the universe that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't advanced technology or overwhelming force, but the simple refusal to give up when the odds seem impossible. The day a galactic soldier kicked a Navy SEAL, and 3 seconds later found himself begging for mercy.